Alright, let's talk about Boston Tea Party. It was sold to us as an ultimate act of patriotic rebellion, a defiant stand by rugged colonists against tyranny, a symbolic gesture that screamed, "We will not be taxed." It's thought as this heroic, spontaneous uprising. The reality, it was more like a targeted, corporate-sponsored protest carried out by a mob of amateurs who were really just angry about cheap tea. First, let's clear up the biggest myth. The Tea Act wasn't about raising taxes on the colonists. In fact, it did the exact opposite. It lowered the price of legal tea. The British government wasn't trying to squeeze the colonists for more money. They were trying to bail out the British East India Company, which was drowning in debt and sitting on 18 million pounds of unsold tea. The Tea Act gave the company a tax break, allowing them to sell their tea directly to the colonists, undercutting the smugglers who were bringing an illegal Dutch tea. It was a corporate bailout designed to flood the market with cheap legal tea. So the colonists weren't protesting a tax hike, they were protesting a price cut. And who was most angry? Not the average person who wanted cheaper tea. It was a wealthy merchants and smugglers like Samuel Adams and John Hancock, whose illegal tax-free tea business was about to be wiped out by a cheaper legal alternative. They were about to be priced out of the market. The Boston Tea Party wasn't a principled stand against taxation without representation. It was a bunch of wealthy businessmen protecting their illicit profit margins. It was a corporate protection racket disguised as a political protest. And the event itself, it wasn't some spontaneous burst of revolutionary fury. It was a meticulously planned quasi-military operations. Dozens of men, some disguised as a Mohawk Indians, not to hide their identity from British, but to hide it from the fellow colonists, boarded the ships. They weren't a chaotic mob, they were organized. They methodically smashed open 342 chests of tea and dumped it into the harbor. They were so careful, in fact, that when a padlock of one of the ships was broken, one of the protesters replaced it the next day. This wasn't a riot, it was a controlled demolition of the competitor's product. The aftermath, the British didn't go, "Oh dear, they've tipped some tea, we must reconsider." They went ballistic. They saw it as a direct assault on the authority of Parliament. Their response was the Coercive Act, or what the colonists called the Intolerable Acts, which closed Boston Harbor and stripped Massachusetts of its self-government. This act of vandalism, this overrated tipping incident, didn't lead to compromise, it led directly to war. This wasn't a brilliant strategic move, it was a massive escalation that the colonists were barely prepared for. So the next time you hear the Boston Tea Party hailed as a spark of liberty, remember what it really was: a protest against lower prices orchestrated by wealthy smugglers to protect their black market business, executed with military precision and so profoundly annoying to the British that it kicked off a war they weren't ready to fight. It wasn't about tea, it was never about tea, it was about money.